So land whispering was actually a conversation between myself and an amazing architect in Marin County in California, Brad Hubble. And Brad Hubble from Hubble Daily, absolutely beautiful architect, lovely, lovely human being. And him and I having this conversation, and I was telling him about, on my podcast, Jeffrey Dungan, who's an architect from Alabama. And Jeffrey was saying to me, well, you know what it's like. You look out across a site and, the building kind of just stands up in front of you. And really all we do is fill boxes with light and air. And I went, I do know what it's like. I know what it's like to stand there and envisage a house and see that house sitting in amongst the trees or wherever it is, sitting on the beachfront, whatever. And I was saying this to Brad, and Brad and I were having a laugh about this, and I'll tell you one other little story with it. About, each place, especially acreage land, each piece of land has a feeling. It's got an energy in the ground. It's got something that you can tap into. But you probably have to get to a quiet space or centered and, calm down in that space. For us ADHD guys, that's not so easy. But
no, but I hear what you're saying.
Get to the space where you actually start to tune into what's around, and you're listening to the bird song, and you're looking at how the light comes through the trees, say, and you're looking at how the wind's shifted things, where the waters run, and all these things on the land. And there's places that you just walk over and that isn't a spot that you'd ever consider for a house. And there's other spots that you imagine other things happening in. You're not just looking for a house site. You're looking for an environment, you're place making. You've got these boundaries that you can work within. You're looking to make a place of community, connection and security for a family or for whatever it is. We go with the family. And one of the other things with that is what's sacred about those spaces. And if we look to what, say, for instance, a space that might give you the most amazing spot to picnic, or to be away from your house, but you see from your house maybe, but it's like a space that just gives a whole nother energy. And this comes back to the story I was telling him at the time. So another good friend of mine, amazing architect out of Austin, Texas, and I won't use his name because the story's pretty funny. I'm talking to him one day about Frank Lloyd Wright, and he goes, and I can use my language. Yeah. I said to him something about Frank Lloyd Wright, and he goes, that Frank Lloyd Wright was an arsehole. And I'm like, mate, he was the bloody top architect of, the last century. And he goes, yeah, but he was an arsehole. And I'm like, what do you mean he was an arsehole? And he goes, oh, well, what an arrogant bastard, da-da-da-da. And I said, tell me more, bring it on, tell me more. And he goes, well, take that falling water house. And I'm like, yeah. And I said, most famous house in the world, and he goes, yeah, exactly. He goes, there's this family, the Craftmans, who used to come up from Pittsburgh and sit on Bear Run Creek, and they used to summer on this rock and swim in the pools and all the rest. That prick put a house on it. And I'm like, as much as I was like, you're pissed off, I go, this is a very valid point. He goes, he's got acres of country there he could have put a house on, and they could have still picnicked on that rock, swam on it, done that every summer. But that arrogant son of a bitch put a house on it. And I'm like, interesting, eh?
That's going to get some people talking.
Yeah, well, this is when you go back to, is it a sacred spot?
Yeah.
And is this spot sacred enough that you would preserve it and not put a house on it, but put a house in its proximity so that it became available? And so when you're considering your land and you're feeling for all that energy in the land, look for the sacred spots and what are they sacred for and how would you use them? And it might not be for a house. So I look at that and I go, this is part of our land whispering process. Brad and I got into this conversation about this, and we started talking about different land we'd walked on and the way different land ignites us and the way we see things happen in it. And so we expanded that conversation to quite a few other architects. And there's currently 4 of us around the globe, and we all practice it in a semi-structured process. How to whisper a piece of land, how to get at one with it, look for what it is. You often don't want the client there. You might have had the client there. What you want is to be there on your own often. It's lovely to be there before the sun comes up.
Yeah.
It's lovely to be there after the sun's gone down.
Mate, I'm like as
camping.
you're talking, I'm like, we've just recently purchased a farm up north on
Yep.
on the ocean, and I'm just picturing as you're talking and thinking like, fuck, like this is awesome, like. Because and so we've been camping on this spot because it's the one, like, we just love
It's the best
it.
spot.
And we were thinking that's where we would possibly put a house.
Yeah,
but
let's
now,
put a house right on that spot. Now you'll consider.
Now I'm thinking, shit, we maybe need to.
Because maybe that spot is for that casualness, for that openness, and for that, maybe it's a fire pit, maybe it's something like that, that you can still engage the spot before you go and put a bloody dirty house on it.
Yeah.
That changes the wherever it goes forever.
Yeah.
And like this thing of walking over it and letting yourself feel it and becoming in touch with it and listening, sitting and listening in the morning and listening in the afternoon. It's not a one visit wonder. It's like, it's actually going and digging in and looking what the wind does and seeing when the birds come and where they fly in and out of, where do the, roos go or whatever there is, what other stuff's on the land, how you're honouring all that.
Yeah.
Because that's our responsibility to the planet. Because whatever we do is going to change it. Whatever we do, and we're going to do something, is going to change it. So how do we have the least impact with what we do to change it? And the most impact for the humans that come into it, and then create this incredible environment. So that's our land whispering process, and we'll do that for even if we're looking at say an original house that's already on something. Is where did the other people make magic outside of that house? What happens? Where's the dynamic, and where does the land allow for that dynamic to happen? So it's I
love it.
I kind of go, it's a bit of a woo-woo process, but it's not.
No, I love it. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a responsibility is the way I see it.
I actually feel like, so doing this pack process that we have, I believe it has made me such a better builder. It's made me understand design and architecture a lot more. But I love all this stuff because I feel that so many builders don't, like, they just think they're there to build the house.
Yeah,
like,
pour concrete, put up block, put up brick.
Like, this stuff just adds so much more value to everybody. Like, when everybody's on the same page and working towards this, and like like, mate, the last 10 minutes of what you've been talking about just resonates so much with me because I actually, like, I know everything is driven by costs,
of course,
and I know that everyone. Like, my thing at the moment, or something that I really think about a lot, is like the way that Australia is developing, and like there's all these master plan communities popping up everywhere, and the houses are like boundary to boundary, and they've got enough room out the back just to have maybe a pool and a little bit of yard. And the developers feel that because like so many homes, they've got these big parks, no one's connected. Like, parents aren't going to send their kids out to play at the park that's 2 streets away. And
no, not today.
Like, no one can go and sit in their backyard now and look at a beautiful garden or a bit of a view because you're looking at your neighbour's fence. Like,
what happened to when we didn't have fences?
Yeah.
What happened to when you had a house and it sat there and there was no fence to the road? There was no barrier to entry. There was no barrier to entry to your neighbours. In fact, if they mowed half your lawn or you mowed half their lawn, you wouldn't really know other than it was mowed because there was no boundary line. What happened to when we lived like that, where we put up a house and then we got, I don't know whether we got more and more fearful or whether society got sicker and sicker or whether both things happened. And suddenly, like, we're living with fences, walls.
Well, mate, we've got to it as a society where a lot of neighbours don't even know each other.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
don't even talk. Like, like, where I'm going with that is, it doesn't matter how, like, it seems these days, it doesn't matter how big the blocks are in, like, residential areas. People are just making the biggest house,
biggest house they can on it. Fill it up.
I would, mate, and like we're at a point now in our journey, like if anything ever happened or we had to buy a smaller house or whatever, like I know some housing estates now are doing 280 square metre blocks or 320 square metre blocks and that stuff, and they're filling the whole thing with house.
Yep.
I would rather stick a tiny house like on that block and create these amazing outdoor spaces,
100%.
fire pits, pool area, so that even though you've got a small block,
a bathroom and a bedroom,
you can still do what you're talking about. You've still got somewhere that you can create special times and sit outside and watch the sunrise and the sunset.
We do live in Queensland, 330 sunshine days a year for anybody who's listening.
But like, it's, I don't know, it's...
I'm with you.
I love everything you're talking about. I think it's very powerful.